Hi and welcome to AXSchat. We're delighted today to welcome Emily Plummer. Emily works for Buffer. Big fans of Buffer here at AXSchat. We all use Buffer's products, but we're also big fans because Buffer is doing nice things and is making strides towards accessibility and also inclusivity in general. We've had a number of conversations and we've even engaged in Buffer chat on accessibility. So thought it was about time to return the favor. So welcome, Emily. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started to become engaged?
Yeah, so I'm Emily. I'm a developer. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon in the United States. Right now I'm actually in Italy nomading because Buffer is a fully remote company. And I started getting interested in accessibility. I mean, I'd seen a few different talks at developer conferences, people talking about accessibility, and it had always been kind of on my mind. And then I went to Global Accessibility Awareness Day last year. It was actually an event in Olympia, Washington. I went with my mom. She's also a developer. So it was a fun day, and it kind of really just to meet with people who are working in government, making the websites accessible, with blind users, with people who are making the legislation, because this was based in Washington's Capitol. And it kind of just really brought it home for me to be able to talk to people in person and to see what people were doing with their websites, and just I kind of realized how important it was. And since then I've been learning about it and trying to make Buffer more accessible, introducing the company to accessibility, and kind of sharing the good word. So yeah, it's been a really awesome journey so far.
So Emily, so sometimes when I talk with startups and I mention the word accessibility, I get this accessibility. Oh, let's make our app accessible for more and more people. So I say, well, that's not really what we're talking about here. So can you tell us about your how we're able to introduce this culture and of accessibility and what accessibility really means at Buffer?
Yeah. So at Buffer, we have this thing called Snack Chat, which is once a week the developers get together and developers take turns talking about something new that they're learning about, that they're excited about. And so I came up with a talk about accessibility, but for this one I invited the whole team. So I invited happiness heroes, which is what we call our support team, and just people from all over the organization, because it had kind of been popping up a lot. Like we were starting to get a lot more emails about, hey, this isn't working. And so everyone kind of knew what accessibility was, but really didn't know like kind of how we could get started and what it could really mean for our company. So I gave a little talk, and I think the most important thing there in the talk was not introducing like programming concepts of how to fix these issues, but really just tying accessibility to our Buffer values, because we take our values really seriously. I think anyone who knows Buffer knows that. Like we're really all about our values, and accessibility fits into so many of them. And so it was really cool to be able to just talk with the team about that. And that kind of opened up a dialogue between me and other people on the team to say, hey, if you have questions about accessibility, you can reach out to me. And a lot of them gave me questions during that talk too. So I was able to just answer them on the fly, which was really cool. That's kind of how accessibility got started at Buffer. We do have an iOS app. Our iOS developer, Andy, has been really, really awesome about making that app super accessible from the get-go. And we get compliments on that all the time. But our web app was really the one that was kind of lagging behind. So as far as accessibility on the web, that's kind of this year, we've been really focusing on that more. Okay.
And I can attest to the values. They're written in all of the stuff that you do. It's really nice. It's I think it's a nice model for a company to have, and it's clear that the organization does live the values. I think that with something like social media, you've got accessibility is a multifaceted thing. So you've got the accessibility of the application that you use to consume. So you've got that. Mm-hmm. You've got the accessibility of the media that you're consuming, but also I know that a hot topic for us, and one that we've discussed offline was the how do you make accessible content. So I know you've been doing some work on this, and I know that particularly image description, or as it's known community, alternative text or alt text, is a really sort of key thing for the accessibility community, because more and more content on Twitter is becoming visual. Whereas in the old days, it was a very accessible medium and attracted people who were blind or visually impaired because it was textual. As we've got more visual, it's actually become so. Twitter last year announced the ability to create image descriptions. So in the native iOS app, you can do that now, and also on the web page. However, lots of us like to schedule things. Obviously, that's where Buffer is strong, and we've talked before about the opportunity to add image description. And I know this is something you've been working on. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So actually, this got started by users on Twitter. I don't remember if it was you, Neil, or Deborah, but someone from the Ally community reached out and asked us to add this in, and I didn't even know that the Twitter API allowed us to do that at that point. So we've been working on that. It's on our roadmap, which is open to the public. It's on Trello. And I've actually built most of it, so it's close to being done, but it's kind of waiting for other features. And I think what's really exciting about this is that not only, we can build our website to be accessible by all, but Buffer can have a impact on so much content on Twitter because there's so many users using Buffer. And if all of those users were adding alt text to their images, even if half of those users are adding alt text to their images, it could just have a really big impact on how accessible Twitter is. And I think that's why we're all really excited about it. So yeah, that's definitely coming up soon. It is in the roadmap, in the works.
Excellent, and I think that's going to be great. I mean, I do use scheduling, and at the moment, I have to make my text in my scheduled tweets match the text in the quotes, because there's no other way of doing it. And it would be quite nice. You could get more information in if you could create alt text. So that would be great. I won't.
It's important to know that there's a lot of users. We assume someone is blind that they like to share images. No, it's not just I just want to type and write text. They really like to also to create images, create codes. So that's something that they also like to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And people want to be able to, share and use the same content that everyone else is, and they just want to be able to interact with it. So I think that's important to acknowledge. But I know you've done some other things around accessibility too. You've helped me with your plugin for TweetDeck. So I'm dyslexic, and I have some issues around cognitive accessibility, and I was getting really confused. Deck, especially actually, it's usually during our Twitter chats when I was trying to respond to stuff. I kept hitting buffer, and it was hitting me the buffer thing when I was wanting to respond immediately, and so on. And you've kindly moved all of the buttons around. What other sort of, because there's a big crossover between usability and cognitive accessibility for people who are dyslexic or neurodivergent. What sort of other things are you taking into account to try and make stuff really obvious for people?
Yeah, so one thing that's kind of came up that is apart from all of the screen reader testing that we've been doing is a new project that we're working on right now, kind of a revamp of the composer experience. And I kind of just was able to look at that from the perspective of someone with color blindness, and I noticed that there were a few different things that had really bad contrast ratios. I mean, not bad, but they were hard to see. And so being able to bring it up to the designers, hey, this is something that's really important. We actually have a few people who are on the team who have color blindness. And so, I'm speaking with the designers, let's try to come up with some alternative solution for this so that it looks a little better. So that's one thing. other than that, I've been doing a ton of screen reader testing. There were a few really obvious like unlabeled buttons and stuff like that that were kind of like quick wins to clean up, but there's still a lot more to do. And kind of part of like going back to culture, bringing in culture to this is making sure that the support team feels enabled to come right to me whenever they have an issue, because for me, a lot of things like unlabeled buttons I can fix pretty easily. So I like them to kind of escalate it to me. Like if you get this, you can just DM me instead of making a GitHub ticket, and I can take care of it right away. And I'm kind of like organizing all the different accessibility issues that we have right now and kind of trying to do like 1 or 2 deploys a month on that. But yeah, just like making that connection with your support team that, hey, I think this is really important. Feel free to just ping me on it as soon as you see it. I think that's really important for tech companies to kind of have a process in place for escalating those issues.
So we're talking about the accessibility and designing accessible tools, but when you were starting this discussion on accessibility at Buffer, and you mentioned that some people mentioned that they are colorblind. What is the impact within Buffer from the fact that people are friendly, disclosing, "Oh, I'm colorblind"? Can you reflect on that and how that probably help those colleagues to feel a little bit more open and probably happier for being able to disclose something like that?
Yeah, so kind of the impact that it's had on Buffer was one of our designers brought it up to me when I said, hey, I'm working on accessibility, and he's like, oh man, I'm super pumped about this. I really want to start thinking about accessibility more. I was working on a project. He had been working on a project previous to that where they were going to kind of label things based on color, and it was like red, orange, blue, and someone had brought up, hey, like I can't really tell the difference between that. And so just having that person on the team, I think, is so important. Like you can always have an advocate who is really into this stuff like me, but like I don't have the experience of trying to use a UI from the perspective of having color blindness. So having those people on the team is so important. And I think creating a culture where everyone feels like enabled to share that with each other is the first step.
So to build on that, how about, I mean, we have a big community at AXSchat, and I'm sure, and we're big fans of Twitter and Buffer too. I'm sure if you were to reach out to our community, if you wanted user testers, you'd get a really good response. Is that something you'd be interested in?
Yes, 100%. I would be super interested in that. I've actually been chatting with my manager about wanting to put together some sort of user group in 2017 where, because we've had a few different people reach out to us about issues, and a lot of people have offered to test for us, which is really, really generous. And so I want to kind of formalize that, make a group. I mean, if anyone is interested in user testing, like they can email me directly. That's something I'm actively trying to set up this year.
Fantastic. We always find that it's good to involve the users because they're using stuff. We can always test with assistive technologies, and we test stuff all the time. But it's not the same as getting people that use the tools day in, day out to test stuff. And I know, as a user of things like Dragon, naturally speaking, that the issues sometimes don't come with the user interface. They're actually more likely to be underlying issues like I was going to say buffer overruns, because you've got RAM issues and you've got so different buffer. But effectively, the issues are more likely to be in the interoperability of the devices rather than pure accessibility. It's going to be little bits of snagging that you'll need to do. Also dependent issues because you're using the tool with Chrome or Firefox, and each one will interact slightly differently and has a different plugin for the assistive tech. So all of those kind of things build you up that kind of overall corpus of knowledge and greater understanding that can help you smoother user experience for people, which pure ticking the box doesn't meet this criteria testing never really does.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's, yeah, as much as I can test, I'm never going to have like the life experience of using the web completely, without vision or with some other disability. Like, I'm never going to get to that point. As much as I train myself on voiceover, like, I still miss things all the time. So yeah, we are always really, really happy when users reach out asking to test.
And I've certainly found that, and I would encourage our audience to reach out, because you're not one of those companies that if you fire it off and it goes into the void. Buffer are responsive. It's why we like you.
And we have a good number of technologists and people who have actually worked in the field of testing. And some of them, they created software themselves. So it's a very interesting group to provide that type of feedback. Another part of your culture is remote work.
Yeah.
So
we are 100%
and I'm
remote.
sure that creates, myself and Neil are remote workers. We have a lot of colleagues in our organization who are remote workers, and that creates a lot of we see more and more organizations embracing this way of working. So we all have our own techniques in order to, in the past, you have to wake up and you need to go to the bus or to public transport, and you have your routines. So and now I feel that we all as individuals, we need to find our own ways of keeping some routines, not to get distracted because, oh, I'm at home, it's so comfortable. So you are now working. You are in Italy right now. Can can you disclose the city? It's Milan or Rome or?
I'm actually in Torino, so it's just like 60 minutes west of Milan.
So I'm sure you have worked in many different spaces like the one that you are today. So you can start by saying what you think they have in common, and and the second part of the question is, what strategies do you have to keep yourself engaged as a remote worker?
Yeah. So as far as like what I look for in a co-working space for them all to have in common, definitely fast Wi-Fi. That seems like a given, but it's not always a given. And then also, like, I think it's really awesome to have, like, right now I'm in a sound booth for calls, so I have a lot of video calls. It's really nice to have like a quiet space to do all of those things. And then also, I think what I really like is you can kind of tell online, like, whether or not the place has a good sense of community. I think that can be really important when you're traveling around and working from different places. Like, it's nice to feel like you're kind of belonging in their community, even if it's just for a month. And then as far as like creating routines to not be distracted, I think it's just important to kind of, even if you don't have to, you don't have to have the same routine every day. Like, Buffer is really flexible. You can start your day at like 10, or you can start your day at 5 a.m. if you want to. But I think like sticking to one thing for a while and being consistent really helps me kind of get in the flow. So I always try to like get out of bed, go to a desk and work at a desk. Like, sometimes it's tempting to work like from the couch or like even from bed, but I think it's important to kind of have a space in your home. And if you don't have a space in your home, like even going to a co-working space when you're not traveling, I think can help a lot of people too, because you could have that sense of I'm in an office, and that can help a lot of people focus. So yeah. I also use the self-control app, which blocks distracting websites, and it's really, really hard to unblock them. So that helps me stay focused too.
Okay, so that's quite interesting. So can you share with us the details of the self-control app? Because I have no self-control when it comes to distractions as part of the dyslexia thing. I wonder if it blocks some of my colleagues as well, because they're a major source of distraction. We've got multiple IM apps, which I need to do my job, but also they also prevent me from doing my job at the same time. So I'm a big fan of working from home and remote working in general, because it gives people the flexibility. It's good in some ways. There's many reasons why flexible working is proving to be a boon towards people with disabilities. But yeah, because you can create your own environment, your own working scheme. You can, like with Buffer, you can absolutely have hours that meet your needs, etc. There are downsides. You could start to get isolated if all you're doing is working from home. I have a dog for company. He's quite famous among our community, but I also have a place where I shut myself off. I have a proper office that I've set up so that I don't just try and work from bed or the kitchen table. Although I do find actually it's quite hard to switch off, so I'll go downstairs and I'll sit on the sofa and I'll start working again. But it's kind of a slightly less focused work with the TV going and my wife playing piano in the background. But I spend all day on calls, and so like you've got a nice sound booth there, and actually sound booths are good for another reason, because we've got a lot of people who are neurodivergent. So by that I mean people on the autistic spectrum, people who are dyslexic, non-neurotypical people, and we get whether you need headphones or you need in a co-working space, I guess you're going to need sound booths like that. So what else do you do to try and block stuff out? Because if you're in an open plan environment, how do you focus? Because programming is quite it requires you to have focus.
Yeah, actually, that's something I really struggled with at previous jobs working in open plan environments. I found them to be very distracting, and I would often go home, like if I really need to focus, I'd be like, hey, I'm gonna work from home today so I can like really focus on things, because to me, like I have a really hard time programming while like hearing other people's voices. And I have a hard time programming and listening to music, so headphones wasn't always like a great option for me. I could listen to like piano music or like classical, but that's kind of why I love working from home so much, is when I have days where I feel like I can totally handle being in like an open plan, I can go to a co-working space. But when I feel like I really need to focus, I have the option of staying at home and focusing. So yeah, I really love it. I feel like a lot more productive when I can create my own environment, and I think a lot of people feel that way too.
Yeah, I've got some big old noise cancelling headphones, but like you say, certain music is going to send you off. So I use an app that creates random ambient noises. Again, you can control the sort of levels of the noises and stuff like that, and that's pretty cool, because yeah, it's called My Noise, and you can get it for free, and it's quite good. You can sort of get sort of rain noises and stuff like that, and just basic sort of white noise, because the white noise blocks out the sort of sharp noises, and you can focus without it sort of taking your attention and you wanting to sing along nicely out of tune, much to the disgust of everyone in your co-working space. So so that I use, but I'd be interested in the blocker. Actually, that's something that the W3C are looking at. So we're looking at various ways to deal with distractions. On the flip side, we need to find a way of looking at how we can stop the blocker from stopping important messages. So it's right, like the next step we've got to do is try and work out, well, is a message from my doctor or my kid's school something that should be disturbing me while I'm trying to concentrate? Well, probably.
Yeah.
But how do you trying to work all of that kind of stuff out?
Yeah.
So what do you think the next steps are for your journey at Buffer with accessibility? You've got the work that's ongoing. Are you tying it in with the work that Courtney is doing on diversity? Are those parallel initiatives?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think accessibility ties in really well with inclusivity at Buffer. We actually have an accessibility channel in our Slack, and we also have an inclusivity channel in our Slack, and I overlap and share resources all the time. As far as what I kind of envision accessibility at Buffer for the next year, I really want to, one, get the process down really well. So have a shared board that has all the accessibility issues whenever something comes in, or if someone, oftentimes people will reach out to me directly on Twitter. And so kind of just being able to have that all in a really neat process. The other thing I'm really excited about is I really want Buffer to serve as an example for other tech companies. So I want to write more on the Buffer blog about what we're doing and hopefully inspire other companies to do the same. I think we have a pretty big voice with our blog, and we could use that for good in the accessibility community. And that also includes like talking at conferences and stuff like that too. And then, yeah, I also mentioned the user group. I really want to get a user group together to have help with testing and to just field any issues that come in from them and anything that they run into. I often get people emailing me in, and I'll usually give them a call, and then I also let them know, like, if you run into any other accessibility issues, please like email me directly. You don't have to go through support. That offer is totally open for anyone listening to this too that might have issues on Buffer. But yeah, that's kind of what I see this year. I was just actually talking to my manager about this today, so it's fresh in my mind.
No, and that's great, and community feedback's really important, and I think you're going to get plenty of it, especially now that our community know you, or will do very shortly. I think that's fab. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of improvements coming to the product sets. So you mentioned right at the beginning that you were first energized by the Global Accessibility Awareness Day.
Yeah.
So it's coming around again, May the 18th.
Yes.
Are you going to do anything? Are there any events that you'd like to go to, or you?
Yeah.
By the
So
way,
last year.
Countries.
Last year, there wasn't an event in Portland, so I was thinking about reaching out to the organization to see if I could organize something in Portland. Actually, I had to drive like an hour and a half to get to the closest one last year. So, yeah, and the cool thing, we're going to do this again this year, but last year when Global Accessibility Awareness Day came around, my manager, he was in charge of all the engineers, he said, anybody who is an engineer at the team, feel free to take this day off to go to this event, and we're going to do that again. I think that also kind of ties back into culture, like letting your employees know it's okay to take a day off to go to an accessibility event, because you're going to gain so much knowledge that a lot of the other team doesn't have. I think that's really important too. Really looking forward to this year.
That sounds good. I mean, we ran one the last couple of years within our own organisation, and we held it in London. This year, the organisation that Antonio and I work for, which is Atos, Deborah has her own thing. So AXSchat's a collaboration, but our day jobs with Atos, we're running another event for GAD, and we're going to be running it in 8 different countries this year.
Wow.
And trying to do some stuff online as well. There are also a couple of online events that you may want to join in on. I know the Patiello group have some great webinars. So even if you're miles away from the nearest one, you could possibly join in that, or you'd be welcome to ours, depending on where in the globe you are. And I think it's such a great opportunity for the whole community to come together. And I think that, as a very sociable company, it's a really good opportunity. I'd love to mobilize Buffer to spread the word, because actually the accessibility community is quite insular. The disabled community is quite it's very large, but it's quite often a series of smaller communities. It would be great to use the power of Buffer and Twitter to really get that word out, because I mean, you've got an enormous following. Buffer Chat's very popular. Your blog's very popular. I know that being featured done us no harm. It would be another great, not that I'm forcing you down the road, but it would be great to sort of work with you guys to help publicize it, because it's such a sort of important thing in our collective calendar. And big shout out to Jennison and Joe Devon, who started the whole thing some 7 years ago. It's been a really important thing for bringing new people on side.
Yeah, I'm sure we would be totally into helping spread the word about that. I could write up a little blog post about what we're doing and where we're going to go, and yeah, that could be really cool.
And I'm sure that, you know, we would equally happily contribute you some materials if you wanted to do some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, we should chat more.
Yeah.
And you know, and in the end of last year, the European Union approved the accessibility regulations in Europe. So you know, in government and public services, this is going to be something that they need to think a lot more about. It needs to be part of the things that they build. And if you are an app developer or a startup and you are building something that is going to be used by government and public authorities, accessibility is something that you need to think about. Otherwise, nobody is going to be able to get you into procurement. So it will be, you know, it's becoming more and more obvious that accessibility is a trend that people and, you know, startups need to think about from the moment that they start writing that first line of code.
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree.
So I think we're pretty much at the end of our half hour. I got a bit excited and talked a bit too much, so please slap me down next time. But thank you very much, Emily. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we look forward to you joining us on Twitter tomorrow night.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.